Hello everybody, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I thought this might be a great way to share some personal experience on what the expected costs might be of living in New Zealand. So we're from South Africa and been here for just a little under 2 years. And in this video, we just hope to give you a bit of head start preparation as to what you would expect to be spending on your everyday costs. So getting into a work-home lifestyle routine in a new country can seem like a challenge at first, but once you come to understand and align yourself with what's needed in your budget and tick off all those boxes, it just makes the process a lot easier. In this video, we're going to take a look at the four main cost areas. These would be the areas that would probably impact your week-to-week budget the most. So looking at those points firstly would be number one, rent and accommodation. Secondly, food and groceries. Third being your utilities and power. And fourth being transportation and fuel. Now, getting to the first point, which is your rent and accommodation, finding a home in New Zealand can be a complex process as the demand for homes is high and the availability low. You'll find that rental agents can be extremely busy. In some cases, your calls and emails may not get answered. So being persistent really helps. So before taking up your rental, there are initial payments generally needed. The first is a 4-week rent upfront, which is your security deposit in case of any damages to the property or falling behind in arrears. And then the second would be a 2-week rent in advance. This is to keep you ahead of payments, as being on a week-to-week cycle, it's easy to fall behind. So in total, you would need at least 6 weeks rent in advance, and from there onwards, your rental would be weekly. Then looking at what rent generally goes for, in this video we're going to present two scenarios, one being for a single person and the other being for possibly a small family with children. So looking at the price of rentals, for a single person that would be boarding or sharing a place, I think they would expect to pay anywhere from $200 to $250 per week. This would include use of bathroom and kitchen, and sometimes utilities and Wi-Fi are included in this price. You could pay a little bit more, a little bit less, but this is the general understanding of what I have. And for a single room apartment, for a single person, maybe $350 to $400 per week. And a 2-bedroom family home, $450 to $550 per week. Then you also get the more upmarket houses or apartments. A 3-bedroom upmarket home, you can look at paying anywhere from $600 upwards. So these are just really estimates of my gauging the property market and rentals. And from a personal testimony, when I first arrived in New Zealand, I was flat sharing with some people in their house until my family could come over several months later, and I was paying $230 per week. This included my utilities such as Wi-Fi. I had to provide my own food in this case, but I had my own room and use of the bathroom and everything else. So when my family was about to come over several months later, I was in church one Sunday and I bumped into a guy who mentioned to me if there's anything I'm looking for or needing, I must just give him a shout. And I mentioned to him that I am looking for a home to rent, and if he does know of anything, he must please let me know. And then 2 weeks later, he came back to me saying that a relative of his is actually looking for tenants to rent. So I was lucky enough to get a deal directly with the landlord, who were some really nice people. They left some furniture in their house for us to use while we were renting the house, which was a really good transition process for us. But then when we moved to a new area, we actually struggled for almost 2 months to find a place, as we had to eventually go through a rental agency, as the same luck we were expecting became a bit more challenging. And that's why I say this is a situation that can be up and down. You may find yourself lucky to get accommodation quickly, you might have to wait a bit longer. The 4-week rental deposit with the 2-week rent up front is probably the biggest cost laydown that you would have to make when it comes to the rental arrangements. So having that money saved and ready would be good. And then when it comes to finding accommodation from abroad, I would just recommend to go through what looks like a reputable company if you're going through a rental agent, or else if you're going directly through a landlord, to make sure that you have arrived in New Zealand, you've met them, you've seen the property before you make any payments. Sometimes there can be, whether it's an agent or a property landlord, that is demanding that payment to be made now because they've got other people interested in the property. That is a fair statement, but I would not recommend doing that. There are scammers out there that pose as these kind of people. And for you to first be comfortable with the place that you're going to be renting, make sure that the place is in good order, that everything is looking legitimate, especially through the people who are renting it out, then that would be an okay time once you feel comfortable and you've seen it to then make that deposit payment and then continue from there. And then moving on to the next major cost would be the cost of food or groceries. My initial advice would be that fast food outlets are a bit pricey compared to what I'm used to paying. For a single person to get a decent meal would be around $10 to $20. The supermarkets, they have quite a variety of items that you can mix and match and make your own meals. So you do get the cheaper options and the more premium options. Example, a loaf of bread, you can get a loaf of bread for around $1.50, and then you can also get loaves of bread for $3 to $4. Now, the important bit would be what the estimated cost for food would be for you. So, for a single person, I would estimate to spend around $80 to $100 per week. And for a small family with children, around $200 to $300 per week. Now, you can be flexible with this, and it does vary depending on family preferences, but this is just a guideline that you can use, and this is just off of my personal testimony. When I was flat sharing or boarding, I was spending less than $100 a week on food, and that was with the odd occasional takeaway and purchasing from my food from mainly supermarkets. And then for a small family with children, some weeks we spend close to $300 a week, but then we have enough food left over for the following week, whereby we only spend around $150 the next week. So you probably could get by spending a lot less than this. It just depends on your how you want to aim your budget and what your preferences are. And moving on to the next topic is the utilities such as your electricity and Wi-Fi. So in New Zealand, there are different power companies that monitor your power usage. You can choose which company you want to deal with. Some offer both Wi-Fi and electricity, while others will also get you a SIM card deal with that. So my advice would be to compare prices and benefits and go with the cheaper option. So here in New Zealand, they'll offer you really high Wi-Fi speeds that everybody automatically goes for. But coming from South Africa, I was used to using a basic 10 megabyte per second line, which multiple people used, and also for online gaming. And that was good enough for us. Whereas here, a 50 megabyte per second line is considered budget, and some people feel that's not good enough. But for us, we've had absolutely no connection issues using a 50 megabyte per second line. Then electricity consumption. Once you've moved into your property, you can just call up the different power companies and give them your address, and they would give you a quote according to your address, either on a year-to-year contract, which they then give you a slightly cheaper deal, or you can just go month to month. And how they normally work it is they charge you a daily rate along with the charge for power consumption. So they'll charge you per kilowatt along with a daily rate. And some companies would give you the benefit of giving you some free hours during the peak or off-peak times, but then the daily rate might be slightly higher, whereas other companies might not give you that benefit but make their daily rates and their power consumption charges slightly less. So you just got to look at all of those aspects and just see what would be your ideal situation in terms of what would cost you less in power. Then what these type of costs have been for us, firstly, when boarding or flatmating with someone, this is generally included in the rental fee. Otherwise, if you were a single person just renting an apartment, I would estimate you to be spending around $80 to $100 per month. If you are living in a house or a larger place that has usage of quite a big water tank cylinder, which is what they call it over here. We call it a geyser, hot water geyser. That would consume more power. And for a small family, their power consumption would be around anything from $150 to $250 per month. For us, we generally pay around $160 per month on our power, and we are not being sparing with it or anything. We use it as we need to use it, but just know that your hot elements like your stove, oven, and draining out all the hot water from your geyser and then letting that water refill again would contribute to a higher electricity bill. Then moving on to Wi-Fi. Most places are connected to a fiber network, and whereas you can also go for just the general signal Wi-Fi. But with that, like I said before, you can opt for a 50 megabyte per second line, or you can go for something much higher. And the higher you go, the more you generally would pay. Again, it would be ideal to contact different companies and see what they're willing to offer you in terms of that. You don't have to use the same Wi-Fi company as your electricity company. You can use a separate company for either of those. And generally, what we're paying for our Wi-Fi is around $60 per month. There are other Wi-Fi options that are close to $100 per month that have probably a higher speed, but we just chose the cheapest, and so far we've had absolutely no network issues whatsoever. That's with online streaming, playing online games, and everything. With the electricity and the Wi-Fi, this is just a brief summary. It can be a bit more comprehensive than that, but this is really just sharing off of my basic understanding and knowledge around these areas. So moving on to water. Water is also charged either from the landlord or whether from the agency. You get a bill every couple of months. I think it's every 6 months. And that bill, what happens is you have meter readers that come out and they read your water meter, and then you do get a bill after that, which generally for us, what we've spent here being in this property is around $250 for 6 months. And that's with a small family with 2 children. And that pretty much sums up the utilities expenses. The next major expense topic would be your transportation and fuel costs. So with this, there's different options you can go with. My personal advice again would be to try and position yourself as close to work as possible where you stay. You can be sold a dream of living out in a country that's 50, 60 kilometers away, but all these costs would add up quite quickly. And from our personal perspective, trying to live as with minimal expenses as possible in the first phase of being in New Zealand just helps save up a good baseline of cash rather than coming in and trying to live the first class lifestyle from day one. It's pretty much a survival mode from when you first come in, trying to build up a good steady baseline, then being overwhelmed with all different expenses coming from different angles, and transportation would definitely be one of them. You could opt to use the public transportation, buses or trains. The trains are more limited to your larger cities such as Wellington and surrounding areas, whereas buses you would find in most big towns or cities. They travel on a range of 5 to 10 kilometers, and each town or city has got its own bus system, so it would be good to check up on that. The more distance you go with the bus, I think the more fee you would pay. I was traveling in a distance of 3.5 kilometers to and from work occasionally when I didn't feel like walking, and I was paying about $1 per trip. But this again is dependent on distance and area. Then, if you're using your own personal vehicle, The price of fuel would be added to that budget. Fuel price at the time of making this video is estimated to be $2.60 per liter for unleaded petrol, and for diesel at $2 per liter. So this would really be dependent on what sort of distance you would be expecting to cover and what your vehicle fuel consumption is. Another cost to consider is doing the warrant of fitness for your vehicle. This is having a roadworthiness check done. This is done once a year if your vehicle is newer than the year 2000. If it's older than the year 2000, you would be doing this every 6 months. You take your vehicle into a certified mechanic who then does a comprehensive check to make sure the vehicle is roadworthy. If there's anything that will compromise the roadworthiness, such as brakes or tires, they would then fail the warrant of fitness, which you then have 21 days to rectify the problem, either with that same mechanic or you can take it somewhere else. And once you have it sorted, you can bring it back to the person who checked your vehicle, and then they would give their sticker of approval. And that sticker would then indicate that the vehicle is roadworthy according to warrant of fitness standards. The cost of this would be around $60 to $100 for the inspection, and you would only have to do this annually. If the vehicle has no mechanical issues, then that's all you would have to pay. These can sound overwhelming with all these different elements of cost, but once you're in the system of things, then it's all pretty much straightforward. There's a lot of costs to think about when driving your own vehicle, such as road user charges and vehicle registration, but all of these combined don't really add up that much. And when looking at it, this is not really to a week-to-week budget or a month-to-month budget. This is more of an annual fee. So my advice would be on this one to just make sure that a vehicle has got its warrant of fitness up to date and the vehicle registration up to date. And with all that being said, bringing this video to a conclusion, looking at all of these factors and bringing them into a estimated weekly budget in total, I think for a small family with kids, probably $800 to $1,000 per week on the budget, 800 being more on the careful, considerate spending side. You could possibly go cheaper than that, and $1,000 and up on a more high-class lifestyle. And for a single person that is boarding or flat sharing, maybe $350 to $450 per week. If they were renting their own apartments, it would then be more. And just finishing off with a personal thought, it's really easy to be caught up in that fifth gear lifestyle of trying to keep up with everybody else. And this is a big contributing factor towards debt and just brings on a whole lot of unnecessary stress. And from a faith perspective, having to disassemble your life and re-establish again, especially in a new environment, a new work pattern and system, has all kinds of trials. It's a time where we are the most vulnerable, and it's easy to think that we've got this covered. There are unforeseen areas of attack, especially through stresses, anxieties, or opposite to that, we can get too comfortable too quickly. We've seen marriages being deeply affected in areas we otherwise would not have thought they would have happened in. And we can so easily convince ourselves we're living according to God's purpose and plan, but then on the other hand, living according to the worldly lusts and pleasures that just make us happy. Or otherwise, we can think that we're doing a move like this to help us to take on a newfound relationship with God. To that I say that being in fellowship, having that accountability to other believers, as well as being consistent with reading the Word of God, has helped us to understand why we're going through certain trials and what the expected outcome is. It's helped us to sustain through these trials. We've gone through some serious trials that have almost thrown us off track, and we only stand here today by the grace of God and His strength, not our own. We are not perfect. At the end of the day, we look to the work God has done through His Son Jesus Christ, and it's continuing to build off of that foundation that God has laid. We ultimately look to fulfilling His purpose and His plan, whether it's at work or at home, and we look to Him for guidance and wisdom. And along with that, just taking some careful, considerate thought when doing your move process, not rushing things, taking things steady, If you're married, then making provision to travel together. Otherwise, if one person is going ahead of the other, ensuring that all the visas and nitty-gritty stuff is cleared so that your partner can join you quickly with no gray areas in the way that would otherwise cause a longer period of separation. And just really considering your move carefully, that what you are doing is according to God's purpose and plan for real. And with that being said, I hope this video has helped, and if there's any further questions you may have, feel free to drop them in the comments below and we can try and help. Anyways, cheers and good luck.